Good morning, grandchildren. This morning I'm going to talk to you about teachable moments, I guess we'll call it. There's times when people need to know information or learn things, and they're not really open to learning. I think I've said before in other videos that it's really good to have healthy debates. That's how you come to good conclusions. But it's really important to have those debates to be respectful and peaceful and focused on the merits of the issue and not personal, not make insults. We come from a family of scholars and teachers and very educated, well-educated and intelligent people. We also have some goofballs, and sometimes there's a mix of two. They're very intelligent, but they're also goofy. And sometimes they're annoying. I can be annoying. Sense of humor tends to be dry or goofy. But all this is not really pertinent to what I'm trying to say, except I'm trying to teach you about our ancestors. What I really want to get to is how to help people, how to learn, how to have a proper attitude for learning. You have to be teachable. And if you're going to be a teacher, you have to be careful about how you present yourself. You don't want to get into an argument. You don't want it to be hostile or personal, because if you end up being wrong, which a lot of times you will be until you get a really good foundation base of knowledge, you're going to have situations, if you make it personal, where you end up being wrong, but you're so wound up emotionally that you have a hard time admitting it, and that becomes a problem, because then without humility, you can't correct yourself, and you end up being wrong, staying on the wrong path. In order to fix that and get on the right path, you have to admit you're wrong, which is extremely important, because from then on, if you don't stay in the right and you stay in the wrong, from then on you're in the wrong. So I mean, this is basic. So that's very annoying. So I highly encourage you to be respectful and be sensitive to whether or not people are teachable, because like the Bible says, if you cast your pearls before the swine, they'll trample on them, and then they'll turn and attack you. And I've experienced that many times, trying to help people who didn't want to be helped, or to educate people who didn't want to be educated. And I've had to deal with that with my children to some degree as a parent, because it can be annoying. And I know I've experienced it myself. My own father was like, trying to talk to him was like trying to talk to a lawyer. And he was very good at quoting and giving you references from memory. And he used to memorize everything that he was trying to explain to you or teach you. And then he would quote all sorts of references from history. His lessons were based on historical fact, and it was really difficult to have a conversation with him and disagree with him without getting educated on whatever the topic was. And that can be annoying, especially for a young teenager who's strong-willed and thinks they know more than they do, or a young adult for that matter. I didn't talk to him for like 5 years because I was so irritated. And that was my bad. I was young, I was in my 20s, and I was not happy with the way my family was working out, and I threw a little immature temper tantrum and did my own thing for 5 years.
Balloons are still there.
Huh?
Balloons are still there.
So, moral of the story is, don't push issues too hard if people don't want to hear them.
I set these over here because I can't put them up there.
It's painful to watch people suffer. Can you take that into your mouth?
Yeah.
To want to help them and them not being open to learning. Go ahead and get your stuff together.
It's on the doors.
There you go. Thank you. I'll be in a minute.
Will you get my
I'll
book?
bring it, yeah. So, yeah, what was I? Someone called me this morning and texted me and wanted me to give them some information that they could give a friend who was arguing with them about type 2 diabetes and whether or not they could cure themselves. And he didn't want me to do it in a big long text because I tend to do that. It's kind of hard to explain some of these things without expanding. There's a lot of technical information. And he didn't want me to send him a bunch of YouTube videos of different doctors. He just wanted me to give him a concise, simple explanation. I can do that with some things, but if you're trying to convince somebody who's resistant to the idea, that's not going to work. You have to, in most cases. There might be a few, but generally speaking, if they don't want to learn, number one, they got their mind made up, you're already up against the wall. In a lot of those cases, if you give them overwhelming information from authoritative sources of facts, they're still gonna ignore you or blow you off. So I've experienced that multiple times. And if you push too hard or if you give too much information, then people get annoyed with you and they call you a know-it-all, and you're shooting yourself in the foot. What's the point? This goes back to what I was explaining before in one of my other videos about this, and that you study a lot of books. Knowledge comes with sorrow. So you can't know a lot of things and not end up being sad about some of it, because you know a lot of things that could help a lot of people, but people don't want to learn. And so you end up having this knowledge, and you can only really apply it to yourself for the most part. And you can help people, you can develop skills in order to help people to learn. But from my experience and from what I've read of other people who are very knowledgeable in their experiences, and psychologists that I've talked to personally, a lot of times people are set in their ways and they just refuse to change. And that's their choice. You can't force them to change. The Bible says that too. That's why God gives us a free will. So that's it's kind of a frightening thing to think about. When you see people around you that think they know and they don't, and they've got it in their head that they do, you have to question your own thoughts. You have to question yourself. Well, if that person can think they know they're right and they're obviously wrong, that could happen to me. And that's a very valid thing. I totally believe that. If you don't believe that, that's how you end up getting yourself in that mindset and get yourself in trouble. And being that I come from families of geniuses and scholars and people who like to study, I've seen it. I've seen it multiple times, in small matters and in big matters. Sometimes people get opinionated and they refuse to look at the full picture, and they refuse to listen to anybody who has other evidence of other things, and they're convinced that their way is the right way, and they just refuse to look. And 99.9% of the time, it's purely because of their pride and their refusal to have an open mind and actually want to learn. So intelligence is not the most important thing. It's your attitude. And you can be super smart and super stupid. I've seen it multiple times. I've done it personally. I've had to eat crow a few times. And I force myself to eat crow because I don't want to be that person. I'd rather eat crow. There are situations where there's no proof of anything one way or the other. You will have doctors and lawyers and psychologists, you name it, the expert field, scientists. They will argue till they're blue in the face. Both sides of an argument. Sometimes there'll be a third or fourth, fifth, sixth side. And none of them can make a proof of what they're saying. And that goes back to what I was saying before about science becoming a religion. Because there are a lot of science theories that have become religious in that they're based on faith and not fact. They're based on an opinion, not objective fact. And creation versus evolution is one of those. We're not monkeys, but because they see evolution in the world, Darwin put this theory together that that's how we came to be man, and that's not at all. Mathematically, that doesn't even work out. But they don't want to deal with that part of the issue. They don't want to look at the mathematics or the history or the timeline of how fast evolution takes place, and on the massive scale that it's taken place according to their theory, it's not possible. It's never been duplicated. The idea of that's never been duplicated in the history of the world. So that's just one example. There's lots of examples like that in science, in the medical field. Some doctors you talk to, they think they know, and they're just convinced that they've got the facts. Other doctors you talk to on the exact same subject, very knowledgeable, and what they say makes perfect sense, but they acknowledge that they can't prove it. Whereas the other guy will just say, this is statistically, this is how it is. This is the facts. Having worked in the medical field, I've seen you can't cookie cutter people. People are different. And there's so many different factors involved in our health that is generally, my experience personally with my own life, it's not one thing. It's a multitude. It's a synergistic combination of things. And so let's take genetics, for example. I don't want to go on too long. I could talk about this forever because I've done a lot of reading. But take your genetics, for example. Your genetics, that definitely has it's definitely the foundation and blueprint of who you are as a person, physically and mentally, spiritually for that matter. But you have to understand that the combination of your genetics between your mother and your father and all the ancestors that came before you manifest in different ways. This is all well documented. It can skip generations. It can have different combinations, and you can have events during the pregnancy of your conception that will alter your DNA along the way, so that you come out deformed or have some other gift that they didn't have, or some deformity they didn't have. And then you add on to that your life experiences, your environment, the different types of stress that you're under, physical, mental, emotional. You can factor in your environment, different things you're exposed to chemically, thought processes, your attitude, your experiences in life, and how that affects your trajectory and what you expose yourself to and how you live. All these things can affect how you develop. And that never ends, even as you age. When I was young, they used to believe that, they used to teach that once you damaged your brain, it was dead. There was nothing you could do to repair your brain tissue. Well, that's totally been completely turned upside down. So now they say from the time that, from the time they're born until after you die, your brain is still trying to develop, function. The same with the nerves. Sometimes they successfully repair severed nerves or damaged nerves, and sometimes they don't. And it just depends on the situation. And this comes back to the spiritual aspect of it, which is God. God has control of things on a minuscule level that we can't control. And so a lot of times when we're dealing with issues in life, should be all the time, we really look to God to help us through it all. Because if you can do everything that you're supposed to do and do it right and do it well and still fail, and another person will succeed. And some people call that chance. But if you believe in God, there really is no such thing. God created everything from nothing, and everything functions and exists by Him, in Him. He's everywhere present, fills all things, but He's also above and beyond creation. than the nothingness. You can't describe it. You can't explain it. It's a mystery. But you can believe it, and you can see evidence of it, and you can experience it if God reveals it and opens you up to it by you seeking it and asking. Not that you're asking for signs, because that's not really appropriate, but He wants you to have faith and to seek Him, and by seeking Him, you get to know Him, and you'll learn, you'll see how He affects things. So a lot of things that you're dealing with really have to be dealt with on that level, and that's where the balance comes in with having the knowledge and suffering, and having the joy of being granted that knowledge. So with that knowledge comes pain and suffering, but you also have the comfort of that knowledge that God granted you, and you can thank Him for it and get to know Him, and so that you have that peace and comfort within yourself that you're not going to get from outside yourself. There's a bit of a trade-off there. You want to be normal, and you want to fit in, and you want everybody to like you, and you want to have that comfort and people to know you, but you want to have knowledge and get close to God. And if other people don't do that, you're kind of a weirdo outcast. And the more knowledge you have, the more of a nerd you are. And the more of a nerd you are, the less you fit in. The less you fit in, the more people pick on you or give you garbage. And the more you try to help people, the more you get slapped in the face with it, being a know-it-all or whatever. And then, so then you have to deal with that. But at the same time, you have the comfort of knowing that information. Not to be prideful or narcissistic about it. None of that. That can happen. That's a danger, but that's not what it's about. You won't. Yeah, that just causes problems. But I know lots of people like that. A lot of these people who think they know that you're a know-it-all and they think they know better, they're the narcissist type. They're the ones that actually are the narcissists. Because a narcissist is someone who has an overinflated perspective of themselves, and they don't care to know whatever's out there. They're totally focused on glorifying themselves and putting other people down. Anyway, I've been called that a time or two too, and that's not the same thing. Narcissists don't. This is one of the benefits of going to confession all the time. You go to confession and you're constantly acknowledging your sins. How can you be a narcissist if you're constantly screwing up and you're acknowledging it and you're apologizing for it and you're trying to fix it? That's not the definition of a narcissist. But the ones calling you a narcissist that refuse to do those things and refuse to acknowledge they're not correct, go look up the definition of a narcissist. Read about it. Anyway, all this boils down to humility and teaching people who want to learn. And if they don't want to learn, don't waste your time, just like Jesus said. Don't waste your time casting your pearls before the swine. And it's a little bit more difficult to do that when it's your own family, because you have to live with them all the time, and you suffer when they suffer. And this is a universal thing. It's not just me or my family. This is everybody. We all suffer what other people suffer, and this is one of the pains of knowledge, is that the world is suffering around us because of its sin and because it's not obeying God's commandments, and because that causes all kinds of corruption, which causes all kinds of misery and abuses of power and abuses of people and killing people. It's very painful to experience. Even though we're not causing it, we see the solution. You can't fix it because people won't listen. That is the pain of knowledge. Having said that, it doesn't make me Superman, super smart. There's no reason for me to glorify myself. All good comes from God. Okay? It's something that God grants me to have. And I have to constantly try to maintain and develop. And in the process of constantly trying to maintain and develop it, I'm constantly screwing up and failing. It's just like an athlete who's becoming an Olympian. They may be the best in their sport, but they're still constantly pushing themselves and failing, and pushing themselves and failing. They're not focused on competing with other people until they get in the actual contest of the Olympics. But in the private sector, in the rest of their life, they're trying to improve. And even Olympians get to the point where their age and their body won't cooperate and they start declining. So if you have that knowledge and that mentality, you're not going to be prideful. You're going to be humble, because you know it's not you. It's God grants you, and you're going to lose it eventually. So really important. And the final thing I'll say about trying to help people come to knowledge or to understand things, and something that I need to develop better that I don't do very well. I do well when I want to, and I focus on it, but a lot of times I don't. It's just more expedient just to say the knowledge, but it's much more effective if you can ask the right questions. When you're trying to share knowledge, it's more effective to lead the person to the answer than it is to just tell them the answer. Because if you just tell them the answer, they put the walls up. You're a know-it-all. They don't want to hear it. They think you know everything. And we see a lot of that in the world. Nobody wants to listen to that, self included. But I do anyway, just because I want to know. Sometimes people who talk like that actually do know what they're talking about, but their delivery sucks, and I'm guilty of that sometimes too. So the more effective way, though, and my father was very good at this, is he would ask leading questions. Now, that's also a dangerous trigger, because once people figure out what you're doing, sometimes they'll get really pissed off. They'll get really angry at you, and they won't like that. So it really just depends on the person, whether or not they're teachable and whether or not they really want to know. So I definitely want to know. I definitely want to learn, even though it's painful. I want to grow. You can't grow without pain. And you can't grow without making mistakes. Making mistakes is part of success. You have to understand that. So pray for me, a sinner. God bless. Over and out.